Thank you everybody for coming along to the latest of the Ask the Expert series. And, you know, I hope we're not feeling that we're all imposters, because you're more than welcome and you're in exactly the right place. I'm delighted to have Lewin with us today, and I can't wait for this actually, it's going to be brilliant. And Ali was introduced to me by Jason, who's on the call. Thank you very much, Jason. I wanted to just kick off this session before I hand over to Ali in terms of Ryan posted up on LinkedIn a video that he produced, and I just wanted to share this because it actually really frames the whole discussion today.
You may have a particular job role or be in your industry, and you look around at the competition and you think, wow, they really belong. They were made for this industry or job role or whatever. But you can't say the same for yourself. But why? The answer is in fact pretty simple, and it's something that all of us battle with to some extent, and it's something called Imposter Syndrome. Oh yes, please tell me more about why you're unqualified for this industry, but your competitors are, just because they seem to know what they're talking about on social media, or have a swanky logo, or they're on the cover of a magazine. They definitely don't have doubts about themselves and worry about how others see them. They definitely don't worry about interacting because they fear of not being relevant enough. And they certainly do not worry about being relevant in their industry. Not at all. Nobody worries about this except you, obviously. The real value is your interactions and strengths and what you bring to the table. Overcoming imposter syndrome is not becoming comfortable with yourself. It is simply learning how to manage your feelings to change how you deal with your own negativity.
Excellent. Ryan, thank you very much for that. If you want to unmute yourself, I know I'm going to put you on the spot here, but it would be great to get some background as to why you produced that.
Absolutely. So we produced it as one of our persona groups as part of our Deeply Human offering. We do personal branding. And so we wanted to identify the different personas that were potential clients of us. And going through a process of speaking to real people, we realized that this imposter syndrome subject came up time and time again. So I put out a poll on LinkedIn and I asked the question, what's stopping us from developing our own personal brands? And actually imposter syndrome was a top answer. So I thought, actually, this is validating some of our theory behind this particular problem that many of us face. So that's why I produced the video. It's a series of 6 different persona videos, and we wanted to have a bit of fun with it because I think normalizing the subject can help everyone talk about it. I've suffered with it probably quite mildly, I would say, coming from a sales background. After 12 years of being a top performer at Yale, into running my own agency, I felt I didn't belong when I went into agency networking groups. So I was judging them as well as judging myself. But that was all self-talk. It wasn't reality. It was, I don't belong because these people are more creative than me. Yeah, they're all kind of connected and friends. They don't want any salespeople coming into their groups type thing. So that was the play out in my head. It's softened, and as time has gone on, I've realized that actually that's my own insecurities and my own negative self-talk. And so I don't feel that anymore. And I love agency owners. So there you go.
Excellent. Ryan, thank you very much. Sorry to put you on the spot like that, but that was brilliant. And Ali, I'm sure that's framed that beautifully for you. And yeah, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, let you introduce yourself, because you can do that better than I can. And away you go.
All right, thanks, Chris. And yeah, Ryan, thank you so much, because that really does work very well with the presentation that I'm going to do. And a lot of the things that came up in your video, you know, are a fundamental part of what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm just going to try the screen sharing. Brilliant. So let me start by introducing myself. And actually, it made me laugh when the picture came up this morning, because there's nothing feeling, there's no feeling like being an imposter when you look at a photograph of yourself pre-lockdown, and everybody realizing at the end of lockdown you're not a real redhead because I haven't been able to go to the hairdressers. So if anyone's feeling like an imposter right now, that would be me. So who am I? My name is Ali Lewin, and I'm an NLP practitioner. For those of you that don't know what that is, it's neuro-linguistic programming, and that's kind of reframing the mind. So for people with a specific negative mindset, maybe it's a phobia, a fear, or they want to stop smoking, or they want to stop eating crisps or something like that, we can develop the mindset and reframe it into a positive way of thinking. And leading on for that, I work as a personal development coach, and I started this, gosh, giving my age away, but really in the early 1990s. And I started going to schools and working with school leavers about their personal development. And then through the years, through my businesses, I've run many businesses. And in fact, I've worked in industry. And my background at university was management with psychology. And psychology is something that's really resonated with me about the whole personal development thing. And I absolutely love it. And I'm the founder of my company, which is called Act On It. And the way that came about is because I also went to drama school and studied as a professional actress. So everything I learned in business, everything I learned in psychology, and everything I learned in drama, I came up with the idea of act on it, because what do people do when they've got a problem? They dwell on it. So the absolute opposite to that, and I work in opposites a lot in my business, is to act on it. So it's a way for me to kind of bring all my skills together. Now I've lost how to get on. Oh, there we are. Next slide. Sorry. So imposter syndrome, why am I talking about this today? Well, it's a subject that's really dear to my heart. And not only have I experienced it, but I've really witnessed it. And there's I want to share a story with you about, I witnessed this firsthand, and it was quite shocking and quite a revelation at the same time. And I'm absolutely fascinated by this thing called imposter syndrome. What I want to talk about, though, is the first thing I want to address is imposter syndrome. I don't actually like this terminology of it being a syndrome, because for me that attaches connotations of it's something that you have to live with. It's something that you've been diagnosed with. They're the connotations that someone says to you, oh, you've got this syndrome, or you assume you've got this syndrome, and it's something that you've got to live with. Let me tell you right now, it absolutely is not. It's not a syndrome, and it's not something that you have to live with. And hopefully you'll discover that as we go along. So what we're going to look at, what is imposter syndrome? How does it manifest? What happens if we don't combat it? What can we actually do? And then hopefully there'll be some key takeaways for you at the end. I do want to, this is about 20 minutes. I'm not really going to engage and ask any questions, but if you have got any burning questions, please put them in the chat box, and then we'll go through those at the end. So I want you to ask yourself, do you recognize any of these statements? I don't feel like I deserve all the successes I have attained. I may get rewarded for my hard work, but I don't feel I've earned them. Even if people praise my skills, I still don't feel as if I'm accomplished as they think I am. I'm afraid that people will soon realize that I'm not as smart as I make myself out to be. Most of the accomplishments I have, I feel were just a fluke. I find it difficult to accept compliments. And I downplay my achievements because I don't feel they are as amazing as people think. Now, if you recognize any of these statements, even if it's only one of them, the chances are that you've experienced it. And it was really relevant that what Ryan said about that poll. It didn't surprise me at all, because the American Institute of Psychology ran a study on this, and 75% of people in business in the field that they did the experiment in had suffered or had recognized this imposter syndrome. A question I want you to think about: is it just modesty? Is it just somebody being humble or self-depreciating that's kind of endearing? And just have a little think about that. Is it modesty? I hope the answer that you've come up with is no, because it does run much deeper than this. And imposter syndrome is related to this idea of perfectionism. And something else I want you to take away from today is that perfectionism just does not exist. And the notion that you have to be 100% of the time, you know, if you don't hit that 100%, you start to embrace these feelings of being not the real deal. And that's really, really damaging. It's a feeling of inadequacy, even though you're really, really successful. It's a fear of being exposed as being a fraud, even though you qualified in your job or the area that you feel the imposter in. And it can be a real belief that you don't belong, even though everybody around you just accepts you in the situation for who you are. And I have to say, this resonated for me, many years ago as a child. And this is where I didn't realise it was imposter syndrome at the time. But one of the reasons that this came to fruition for me was because I realised that the first time I ever got a certificate given to me was when I was 7. And that was a cycling proficiency test. I don't know if any of you are as old as me and remember taking your cycling proficiency test. But that reinforced in my brain that if I had to be accomplished at something, I had to have a certificate to prove it. And that's kind of something I've had to learn along the years. That doesn't absolutely necessarily have to be true. So just think about those things from your childhood. Where did those feelings of imposter syndrome come from? My gosh, Meryl Streep, one of the most brilliant actresses, you know, that we have in this day and age, and I hope you agree with me. And there's a real video clip out there. I couldn't actually find the video clip, but she accidentally outed herself at the Oscars, and she said out loud, "Why would anyone want to see me again in a movie? I don't know how to act anyway, so why am I doing this?" Real case of imposter syndrome. And a story that I want to share with you is in my years, over 20 years as being an actress, going to drama school and whatever, I was in a film, some of you may have seen it, called The Damned United. Now, I'm not going to out anybody in this, but it was, you know, an Oscar-winning director and a real all-star stellar cast. And we were in a kind of tea break situation. And one of the actors in particular had a couple of lines that he was working through, and he was pacing the hallway of the house that we were filming in. And he was getting really in a tiz with himself, and he was going over and over and over this line. And then he just had this sudden outburst, and he threw the sides up in the air, the script up in the air, and shouted all over the house, "For F's sake," and then said his name, "You're an effing actor. Why can't you do this?" And this was a really famous actor. And I sat there and I witnessed this. And it was a real shock to the system that somebody so prolific, somebody that you hold in such high esteem, goes through this angst of feeling like they can't do their job, or that they're a fake, or that they're a fraud, or that they're an imposter. And it's absolutely not the same as low self-esteem, which it often gets confused with, because people who suffer imposter syndrome are usually highly successful and competitive people. And it's usually in a given situation that this fear starts to manifest itself. Whereas low self-esteem, somebody probably lives with 80-90% of the time. This is something that comes and goes, and they can appear to other people as extremely confident. So it's not to be confused with low self-esteem. So let's have a look back at these statements. And one of the things that came up through quite clearly on Ryan's video, which I was really, really pleased about, is this thing about feelings and beliefs. So let's have a look at this. I don't feel like I deserve. I don't feel I have earned them. I don't feel I am accomplished. I'm afraid that people will soon realise. I feel we're just a fluke. I find it difficult to accept compliments. I downplay achievements because I don't feel they are as amazing as people think they are. So these are really typical statements. And as we can see, it's a belief system, and they are feelings that we've created ourselves. So once you start to feel the feelings, then they start to reinforce beliefs. Then the beliefs then go on to reinforce behaviours around this situation. But the really good news is that you can address these feelings, and beliefs can be changed. What happens if we don't? If we don't address our feelings, if we don't change our beliefs, and if we don't conquer our fears? Well, we could end up with severe anxiety, panic attacks, not sleeping, physical symptoms like palpitations, racing heart, sweat. I'm sure some of you recognise those signs of anxiety. And ultimately, this really could lead to depression. But what we know about imposter syndrome is, because the anxiety of self-doubt and fear of failure, we start to strive for this idea of perfectionism. And when we don't achieve that perfectionism, that becomes evidence that we are an imposter. And that sort of brings about those voices in your head. I'm sure you've all had those voices, that little voice that says to you, "See, I told you so." And again, think back to when you were a child, when someone said, you know, why did you only get 75%? Why didn't you get 100%? Why didn't you get 90%? And think back to where those feelings in your belief system comes from. Did you have parents that might have said to you, don't let other people see your weaknesses? Don't let them see that you're afraid. Don't cry in front of people. Don't do that. Don't do this. So when it comes to the combating of your imposter syndrome, really go back and see where those feelings started, where that belief system kicked in, and then how you started behaving as a consequence of that. And you know what, as human beings, we've got this amazing ability to convince ourselves that something about ourselves is true, even when it's not. And there's a real paradox here, because when we start to try and prove things, we stop listening, we stop growing, and we stop developing. And all that we focus on is the proving. And actually, we perform better when we're not trying to prove anything at all. I don't know if any of you have come across this guy, Mark Anderson, but I absolutely love his cartoons. It's really worth a Google, Mark Anderson cartoons. And look at this self-fulfilling prophecy. Turns out my imposter syndrome was pretty much right all along. And again, you start to believe your own hype, and that is something that you really need to address. And again, another Mark Anderson one, this really makes me laugh. Father Christmas. He's been told all his life that people don't believe in him, so he goes to counselling, and the counsellor says, you know, instead of worrying about why people don't believe in yourself, don't believe in you, we should worry about why you don't believe in yourself. I found that really resonated with me. Stop worrying about what other people think about you, and start to think about what you believe about yourself. And there's a really good phrase that I picked up along the way, and I hope you find it useful, is somebody else's opinion of you is absolutely none of your business. So how do we combat it? Well, the first thing we need to do is to start to recognise it. We need to be at one with this imposter syndrome and recognise the situations and scenarios when we feel it might occur. But look at some of these early warning signs, and I'm sure some of you have felt these at one time and another. I know I have when I've been going on stage, for example, in a play, butterflies in my tummy, absolutely feeling like I need to go to the loo, tight throat, shaky body, tears, all of those signs of anxiety. So what we need to do is to learn to recognise them, because once we've done that, that becomes our most powerful combative tool. So if you want to change, it is helpful. Anticipate and prepare for those situations when imposter feelings appear so that we have the solutions ready. Because the thing is, what you will learn is that the situations and the scenarios are quite predictable. It's usually the same kind of thing that starts this off for you. So what you need to do, identify the feelings, be at one with them. As I said, it's going to be your greatest early warning system. And we need to understand as adults that we have a choice. We can act on our feelings or not. And for some of us, that the experience of imposter feelings can trigger withdrawal. And if that's something that happens to you, then once you've identified that, you can start working on the opposite. If you find that your imposter syndrome brings out a confrontational side of you that you're unhappy with, then again, once you've identified that, you can start to hone in on those feelings and start to pare that back. And this is absolutely fundamental to part of your healing process. You've got to let it out. And I'm sure, as Ryan said in the video, and when he was explaining why he did the video, once you start talking to people, most of us have experienced this. And if you can find a trusted friend, a trusted colleague, or somebody whose opinion you absolutely trust, and you start talking to them about this imposter syndrome, you will find that they will say, oh my God, I felt that as well. So share best practices, start to learn about how other people have dealt with this. And once you've let it out, what I find is really useful, and I do this with all of my clients, is to keep a journal. And once you start writing things down and you start to assess how things are manifesting and the feelings that are occurring, the logical and the rational part of your brain starts to kick in. So once you've got something on paper in front of you, you can treat it like a project. You can treat it like something that you've been given to do to work on, as if it was something to do with your work. If it's in your head, it starts to fester and it becomes feelings and thoughts, and they stay in your head and it becomes jumble and kind of mashed potato, I call it. If it's out on paper, you say, right, I've got a project now. Let's work on a strategy. And I find that really useful. And another thing as well is, once it's on paper, you can start to make goals and objectives towards it. Right, okay, what are these feelings? How am I going to change them? What is my goal? I want to get rid of this imposter syndrome. How long am I going to give myself? We've all done kind of SMART goals. And attacking this and using it as a project can really help you and bring out that rational side of your brain, because the fear and the anxiety is very much the irrationality that's taken over. So you want to reverse that. Another thing that you've got to do is reconsider your perception of failure. It is okay to be wrong. You can't know everything. I mean, Chris has set me up today as an expert. And what is an expert? Yes, I know a lot. Yes, I'm well studied. I can't know everything. So part of not being an imposter is to keep continuing in your development, keep growing, keep learning. Things change, the world changes. So you need to grow and adapt with that. And not knowing everything doesn't make you fake or non-deserving. And remind yourself that you will learn more as you progress. I mean, top-notch teams lose. Think about Liverpool, the greatest team in the world. They lose matches, Think about Alan Sugar when we've watched The Apprentice. He sometimes gets it fundamentally wrong and hires the wrong person. He makes mistakes. So you've got to reconsider your perception of failure. What does failure mean? And if that means to you not being perfect, therein lies your fundamental problem. So you have to kind of let go of this idea of perfectionism to help you change. And, sometimes remember, nobody really knows the outcome of what it is that you're trying to do. There's only you. So nobody is judging you on a failure. And you've got to try and remember that nobody else really knows the outcome. And the fact that you're even trying and attempting at things, it makes you admirable. It doesn't make you a fake. And start to reaffirm your self-worth as well. Accept your successes, and being kind to yourself is really the first step in your self-development journey. And you've got to learn to be your own best friend. And that thing about not being able to accept compliments, if one of your things that you identified with was, I find it really difficult to accept a compliment, learn to just smile and say thank you. So when someone compliments you, instead of saying, oh my God, but such and such, just stop. Just take a deep breath and then just smile and say thank you. Now that might seem really simplistic, and to be honest it is, but it's so powerful. And once you've got into that mindset of the positive and reaffirming your self-worth and saying thank you to other people for acknowledging your successes, eventually you will start to believe it yourself and change your mindset to the positive. Nothing is ever a quick fix, and that's something else that you have to kind of acknowledge on your self-development journey, that you can't suffer the symptoms of imposter syndrome on a Tuesday and do all of this on Tuesday afternoon and wake up Wednesday and it's all gone. It takes time and it's an investment in yourself, but it's really, really worth it. And the last thing I would say about this is refrain from comparison. Stop comparing yourself to other people, because your real happiness and your real sense of self-worth stops when you stop comparing yourself to other people. You know, it's very easy for me to say, well, you know what, I'm a life coach, but I'm not Tony Robbins. Well, no, I'm not, but I'm me, and I've got my own values and my own self-worth. Yes, I'm an actress. I'm never going to be Judi Dench, but if I keep comparing myself to Judi Dench, that's always going to be damaging for my own mindset. So it's about accepting who you are and refraining from those comparisons. So what have we learned about? Imposter syndrome is not something you have to live with, and I really want you to take that away today. Stop thinking of it as a syndrome, because it's not something that you have to live with. It's a set of feelings and thoughts and beliefs that you have learned along the way. And the good news is you can unlearn them. And the even better news is you can learn new ones. And you will perform better once you've taken away the pressure of performing. I really hope that you've got something out of that. And if you don't mind, if I could just share with you that I have got some more upcoming webinars. Saturday the 20th of June, I'm doing Boost Your Self-Confidence. I'm redoing this Imposter Syndrome, which will last an hour, on the 29th. I'm running a webinar on anxiety and how to combat it, and be your own life coach. And if anybody wants to join in on any future webinars, then please go to Eventbrite. But for now, thank you very much for listening. I really hope that you took something away from that, and I'd be really happy to try and answer any of your questions. Thank you very much indeed.
Excellent, Ali. Thank you very much. I thought, would everybody like to unmute themselves? And, you know, if you have any questions or comments, I know Peter's got one and Philip has got some comments that they've put in the chat. I think it's always better to give you the guys the opportunity to say what you want, as opposed to just reading out what you've typed in. So, Philip, you were first. Do you want
to? Your list of things was great. Apart from the top one, I identified with all of the others, so that was great. Imposter syndrome, the question revolved around whether it's just basically a vanity syndrome, in that it applies to people who are already successful and don't feel they earned their success. So it's a bit like Stockholm syndrome sort of thing, or some other guilt type situation where the underlying thing is, I don't deserve this. There are others who are, better, blah, blah, blah. And especially if there's going to be a lot of people now who've been furloughed and who are going to be looking for jobs. Lots of those will be in older age brackets.
Yeah.
They may not have been looking for a long time. So putting their CVs together, pushing them out online, trying to get to things. There's a lot of, whatever successes they've had in their careers so far, I know from my point of view, and being older, I'm looking at things and going, can't do that, and can't do that, and can't do that. So is there a way in which, how can I put it, it's not really imposter syndrome, it's actually more fundamental limiting beliefs, which are really down to low esteem. In other words, you said they were different. How do you tell the difference? Do you have to have just made it to have imposter syndrome, or what's your definition of the two?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, Philip. And as I said, I really don't like the terminology imposter syndrome. The way I differentiate it from low self-esteem is that usually people who have this, and you quite rightly said, they're usually very highly successful people, usually quite competitive, and usually people who go over and above and beyond all the time because they feel if they don't hit that perfectionism, people will out them as a failure or a fake, or they shouldn't really be there. So they're usually quite high achievers. People with low self-esteem tend to be the opposite. So they stop themselves from achieving because they have a similar belief that they don't feel that they're worthy, but it comes from a different place. And you're absolutely right. I don't think I agree about the vanity thing. I think that's something different. But you,
I just stuck that in to be awkward.
Yes, but you're absolutely right about the limiting beliefs. I mean, they're the fundamental thing, that the whole thing about our lives, they stop us doing everything. And what I would say is, when you're going through your CV, you've said, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do that. Your mindset has to change and stop focusing on what you can't do and reassess and focus on what you absolutely can do. And part of the healing of the imposter syndrome, if we're still going to call it that, is to address what you can do. Go back. How hard did I work for this recognition? What did I do? And as I said, write it down on paper so it becomes something in front of you. And if it's in your head, you're always going to mess with it while it's in your head. But address your achievements on paper, write them down and say, yeah, you know what? I worked damn hard for this and I achieved that and I achieved that. And it's a belief system. And you've got to change your feelings around your successes, because changing your feelings then go on to your beliefs. So the more positive your feelings, the more positive your belief system, which then again, it's cyclical, go onto your actions and your behaviours. So I hope that...
Clearly I was asking that for a friend. So.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, well, get your friend to get in touch with me and I'll help them.
Pete, you had a comment?
Yeah, it's kind of something I've received as well as given out. I worked for more than 25 years in the clothing industry, and with hindsight, unfortunately, I was a very young high flyer in it. So I had great success right up until I was no longer working in it. But I found that the age point of view that Philip mentioned was, and I put in my comment, it's strange because you feel like many pro footballers, you can carry on playing. It gets a little bit more difficult, but you can carry on after your sell-by date. And mine was kind of 42, 43. I was head of design and product merchandising, and I did all of that, and I did very well at it. But then when I decided I'm going to leave, and you expected to jump into the next job as soon as you left, because that's normally what happened, it didn't. And then you start thinking, hold on a minute, what's going on? I can still do it. I'm still good. I've got such experience, but then the jobs aren't coming through.
Yeah.
So then I retrained in what I'm doing now as a coach, advisor. But obviously the salary, going from a a very high six-figure salary down to what you earn for yourself, and I know this is, I'm not unique in this, has been quite a challenge. And some of the things you've brought up are very relevant in terms of identifying what it is. Because it's not low esteem. I'm quite an outgoing, gregarious kind of guy, but you kind of think, well, hold on a minute, where's the money?
And let me tell you something, Pete, that's really, thank you for bringing up the age thing, because if I can just share with everybody, I said I went to drama school. I didn't go to drama school until I was 44. Now, I'm in a class and there are 60 people at my drama school, and I'm the oldest by 20 years. So you can imagine those feelings. I mean, I'd already been a working actress for the 10 years previous, or maybe even longer, probably 13, 14 years previous to that. I started acting in my late 20s, and I was quite successful. I'd been on TV quite a lot. I'd done all kinds of things. I'd been in numerous plays, lots of TV ads. And then I suddenly had this thing about, you know what, I'm an imposter because I don't have a certificate to prove that I can act. So at the age of 44, I went to drama school, and that was when it really kicked in for me about the age thing, because I kept feeling I shouldn't be here. And even though I know I'd been successful and I'd won Best Actress awards and I'd done so much TV and worked with these famous people, at drama school, because of that fundamental age difference, I kept thinking, I'm the imposter, I shouldn't be here, it's not my time, I should let these kids do it. It took me a while to work through that mindset. And again, going back to the acting thing, watching this person, I mean, there's no way I would give you his name, but you will all know him. And watching this man go through this trauma of not being able to say one line, and he's won, all kinds of awards for being an actor.
He was having a bad day.
Hey, can I just add to that? Just thanks for that, Ali. I just wanted to add to that. I think the age thing affects us all, even if we feel we're young. For instance, I'll give you an example. When I worked for Yale, I was in the most senior channel, and most people's ages were probably around between 50 and 60. They'd done 15, 20 years in the company, and I was the youngest. And did that motivate me? A little bit at the start. It was kind of nice being the young boy on the block. But actually, for me, people are just people, right? Mindsets are mindsets. I jumped into the agency world. I suddenly felt old. I was like, wow, I'm 34. Why have I started so late? Because I've got all of these people around me doing amazing things, growing 200 million pound companies, and they're 26. So I felt old. So I think whatever age we are,
by being 50 plus in the agency world, I tell you.
do you know what? Give yourself a break. Whether you're credible at bloody 70 or whether you're credible at 18, you know what? If we've got value to add, that's where the skills need to be.
I totally agree, Ryan. I think that the thing with it is the reward side of it. I was asked to become a lecturer at Royal Holloway for PhDs, and I said, well, yeah, this is great. I can use all my experience. Students, blah 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 blah, and they said, and it pays 35,000 a year. And I went, huh? I don't mean that. I mean 35,000 a year is great. For some people that's great. It was kind of like, is that what it's worth? All that experience.
That's why I started my career working in higher education, Pete. And one of the things that we used to have a big problem with was there's a big separation between academics and all the other staff. And academics thought they were really wonderful. And all the rest of us used to say, yeah, the only people who become academics, unless you're in one of the top 20 Russell Group universities, you're like Stephen Hawking, bringing in millions of pounds of research, the only people who become academics are people who failed at the career that they're teaching other people to do, because almost all of them could earn more money if they were actually successful.
Yeah, true.
We're talking to people about. But I had my biggest issue, and Ali, that was a great presentation. I always love speaking to you. You're so helpful and so motivating.
Thank you.
But my biggest problem, when I was, I went straight from working in higher education into what I'm doing now. And I'd been encouraged to do it by someone I was working with. But my manager at the time looked at me, and when I said to her I was planning on leaving, and she said, you're in your mid-20s, who the hell's going to hire you for any advice about anything? And that really knocked me back. And I only ended up actually going because her manager, who was my sort of big boss, the deputy chief executive of the university, spoke to me and said, don't listen to her, you're fantastic, you should get out there and do it. But her comment stuck in my head with me for years, and every single time there's a little tiny failure, it's that comment that comes back into my head and goes, you see, I'm right, who the hell are you to do this? But it's taken a long time to try and get over that. You know, and I think a lot of the things that you've been saying, Ali, some of the stuff I do already, I'm certainly going to pick up on some of the other points, but it's so important and so helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you as well, Ali, because it was good and it's interesting. And it's always good to share.
Thank you. If I can just speak on behalf of women as well, because, you know, it is statistically proven that more women suffer from this than men. And that really goes back to when the kind of statistics started to grow right back in the 1970s and the 80s. Because I don't know if when I was in industry in that time and when I was in corporations, there was always this glass ceiling for women. And it was really difficult to be a woman fighting to get to the top of the tree, as it were. And then I got to a point where I was promoted very young, and I worked in a group of 10, and I was the only woman in the group. And then I started to have these imposter syndrome feelings, even though I didn't know that that's what it was, thinking they've only bloody promoted me because I'm a woman and they need to tick a box. And that's another way that can, you know, that can manifest. So it's just something to think about, you know. Stop thinking that you're only there as to tick somebody else's box. You're there on your merit. And I had to learn that, you know, and that was a real lesson, but it was a good lesson because I took that forward. You know, I can do this. I absolutely can do this. So, but it just, you know, just to bring back to the male-female thing, it is a higher proportion of women that actually suffer from this, sadly.
Just going on the sort of the age thing, I wondered, Ali, if you've got a view on how this sort of impacts different generations, because going back to what you said about getting your cycling proficiency test, and I still remember getting mine.
Yes.
The younger generations, you know, when they're coming up, we got into more of a participative type of culture.
Yeah.
So, you know, sports days, you know, everybody got a medal because they took part.
Yeah.
And, you know, that must have an impact on sort of younger generations as they come through. Is there a generational thing?
Personally, for me, I think the most damaging thing to the generation these days is Instagram. I really fundamentally think that some poor teenage girls or even teenage boys are really obsessed with Instagram. And the problem is that they've got this comparison thing going on. Look at somebody else's life. Aren't they fantastic? Aren't they thin? Aren't they beautiful? Aren't they successful? Well, you know, I did a video that I put on LinkedIn, and it was about 2.5 weeks into lockdown. Because personally, I was getting really naffed off with the amount of TikToks and things that were coming up on my Facebook feed, on my Instagram, of people going, aren't I fantastic? We're locked down, but look at how successful and look how motivating I am and look what I'm doing with my time. And I had a real panic attack, and I thought, well, you know what? I've watched a box set on Netflix so far. I've read a couple of books. I've had a couple of lie-ins. I've not been getting up till like 9 o'clock in the morning. This is what I've been doing with my period of enforced lockdown. And I had this real panic attack, and I had to remind myself to stop comparing myself to other people because it's not healthy. And, you know, I only say that I'm not blaming Instagram. What I'm blaming is the culture of the generation. I mean, even my stepson's 27 and he's always on Instagram, you know, trying to portray this fantastic, look at me in a nightclub in London, look at me with my arm around this girl, look at me dancing, look at me boxing, you know, look at me doing this. And I don't think it's healthy for your own self-esteem, because all you're trying to do is convince yourself that you're living a life that you're not really. It's one photograph and it's a snapshot. And it's also unhealthy for people who are looking at that thinking, I don't have that. And I think that's where we're very lucky. I think if you're over 40 something, I can't remember when the internet came about, but I feel very lucky to have not grown up with that peer pressure. Very, very lucky, because the majority of my clients now are below the age of 38, and the self-esteem issues that they suffer are because of the comparisons that make on Facebook, Instagram, whatever.
I get that. I think I'm just in the crossover period. I remember doing my cycling proficiency and all of that. And I actually remember, Chris, when things went from getting medals for winning to getting medals for being there.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I left secondary school and went to university. About 80% of the people from my school went to Oxbridge and I didn't. So I already felt like I was one below the standard that I should be. And, you know, then coming out of university and getting into my career, one of my best friends from school, he's now a lawyer and he's earning £250,000 a year. And, you know, my first job was on less than 10% of that. So that's something that I really struggle with, is equating myself, or trying not to equate myself to other people who started at the same place, and remind myself that there are people out there. Like the guy that owns Walmart, he started Walmart at 44 when I think he was close to homeless. And, you know, now one of the biggest companies in the world.
Yeah, the guy who set up KFC was 88 or something when he started.
Look at Major Tom. Look at Major, was his name Major Tom, the guy who walked 100
Colonel
steps.
Tom now.
Colonel Tom. I mean, look, that belief he had, you know, and it was really altruistic, but he had that, regardless of his age. He had a goal, he had a dream, and he did it. And we all celebrated with him. And it just goes to prove that the age is, you know, irrelevant.
Yeah.
The Tony Robbins thing was an interesting one as well. I mean, I know I've been to some of his events, but you see what he came from, living in a car and all that sort of stuff. But
absolutely,
I think it can be a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you look at those people, and yes, they've had the motivation to do it, and look where they are now. And peer pressure can be a scary thing as well. Like you, Lawrence, I've got friends who've sold businesses 3 times over, multimillionaires, working in the industry, multimillionaires, and you think, did I choose the wrong industry? Because that's another fundamental thing.
Yeah. But is he happy? Is he happy? That's the question.
Can I just say that there's nothing wrong in having an aspiration and somebody that you look up to, and that's somebody whose success you can emulate in your own way. You've got to be authentic and true to you. So I can't go and try and be Tony Robbins. I can only be me in the most authentic way. But from his success, I can fundamentally learn, because you know, and that's the difference. It's not a comparison where the danger comes in. It's when you start to think, okay, you know, he's so successful. I admire that. What can I emulate, and what can I bring to my true authentic self?
Absolutely.
Just Nick, you've got a question about NLP very quickly. I'm just very conscious of time. So.
Okay. Thanks, Ali. That was good. Good presentation there. Thank you. I just wondered whether the NLP has sort of crossed my path before. I've never done it, but I've often thought, I wonder, having that background of the NLP training, you know, you could then utilize parts of it and put it to best practice, you know, with your general day-to-day of what you do. So I just wondered.
I don't think there's anything wrong in anybody learning the fundamentals of NLP, and you know, some of the best books out there are the dummy books, the NLP, you know, this for dummies, that for, I bought in fact, yesterday I went to Waterstones and I bought the dummy book for the internet for the over 40s, you know, because I think those dummy books, but there's nothing wrong. I mean, what NLP does is it just helps you to reframe your mind. So it's always looking for the opposite and the positive, and it's that new mindset, new result, which I really believe in. And you know, I think it can be used in any walk of life. It's a really good grounding. I truly believe in it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
But actually, just to add,
yeah,
I think my feeling is that everyone goes through like what we've been talking about this morning. Yeah. It's just to what kind of level you experience it, and how it sort of may remain with you. My wife, for example, just gone back to teaching after 7 years, had all these same thoughts. I can't do it anymore. You know, she's got all the qualifications, but hasn't been doing it. So talks herself out of it. Yeah. She is now, well, was teaching. She's furloughed at the moment, but hopefully we'll be going back to it. So, you know, and I've just changed industry recently, and I've had all the same thoughts, just thinking, hang on a minute, new industry, God, who's going to accept me? So, yeah, I just wanted to say that to you yourself and everyone out there that I can certainly empathise with everything we're talking about here. And I think it's just keeping positive. And
I think the good thing about being a business person and having these symptoms is that we all goal set in our businesses. We all have goals, and we all have business plans. This is why I'm saying take it out of your brain and put it on paper and treat it as a project that you've got for work, and then your rational side of your brain will kick in, and then you can attack it that way, and you can combat it that way. And I truly believe that works for people. It's harder if you're in a different, more creative industry like an actor who has this, because they're not somebody who sits down and business plans and goal sets in the way that a business person would. So I think the advantage that you've got is learning to recognize when it kicks in and then breaking it down. And then that way you can start to address each component part.
Yeah, thank you.
Emma, I think you've got an interesting comment.
It's been really interesting hearing everyone's perspective from almost like their friends being really successful and selling like these businesses for multi-millions of pounds and stuff. And I had it completely opposite, because I'm 24 and I went to normal school, like it did me perfectly. And I was the only one that didn't want to go to university. I had all the grades, like I could have gone if I wanted to. So I had this thing, like, I guess I was quite strong-minded with what I wanted to do, and I didn't know that I wanted to set up a photography business, and I didn't know where it would end up. I just knew I didn't want to go to university. But actually it's quite interesting, because all my friends started going off to university, and I was kind of like, oh my god, have I just made the worst decision by not going, because I didn't follow what everyone else wanted to do. I was the first person in my family to actually say no. Like everyone else in my family, it was a done thing to do, and everyone went off to uni and they all got good degrees and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, have I just made the worst mistake? And obviously now, I don't think I have. Well, I know I have not made a mistake. And but it kind of comes into, like, I had a lot of confidence issues when I first started the business. And we're almost 3 years old. Part of that's age, but I was at age 20, I was training people like twice my age. So like it was never massively an issue until kind of I sat down and went, oh my God, I'm now a business owner, like 21, who's going to listen to me? And I worked really hard on a lot of my confidence stuff. I had this amazing lady who just sat down with me once a week on Zoom, and we just talked about, and it kind of delves into like your childhood and like what might have been, what school tells you to do, what school tells you the right thing and the wrong thing is to do. It kind of like imprints on you. So you have this, well, this is what you do. You're meant to get a job, and then you're meant to work up in the job and blah, 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 which is what everyone else around you is doing. So you've got to separate yourself from that. And then like I worked really hard on affirmations and gratefulness and that sort of thing, which definitely, that's completely transformed my confidence. But also like now I'm looking to, like, a lot of our photographers are young. They're my age and younger. Like we've got an apprentice who's 19 now, and they've all got similar insecurities, and they're like similar kind of like this imposter syndrome, like am I allowed to be here? Like all these people are mega successful, like who am I compared to them? And I felt this exactly the same. And I'm intrigued as to how you would go about passing that on to your team members to help bring them up. Obviously we do a lot of, like one of my photographers, she's like, oh, I've got these family shoots and I don't know what to do. Like, it's not something I've done before. I'm like, but you've done it for us before, so you can do it for yourself. Like, it's not something that you're new to, but it's like all this self-doubt, and just wondering what your view on how to pass that on to them is, really.
Well, first of all, congratulations, Emma, for running a really good, successful business. Well done. Honestly, that's fantastic. And one of the things that you can do with your team is reaffirm their successes and be their champion, so that eventually they learn to be their own champion. I ran a business, I've run several businesses, but one particular business that I had my own catering business, and I had 2 shops, and one was a sandwich shop and one was an outside catering shop. And I I had a philosophy with my staff that I would, if I caught them doing something right, I would reward them. And I never, well, I can't say I never, that's the wrong thing to say, but it was very rare that I would berate somebody for doing something what I perceived to be wrong, and they may have not known was wrong for my business. But when I caught someone doing something right, I congratulated them and showed them what success was. And once they start to get those inner feelings of, God, if I do well at this, I get rewarded. You know, and if you've got somebody who's done a shoot, perhaps, you know, I don't want to tell you what to do, but ways round it, you could coach them into it and say, what evidence have you got? Where have you gone? You've gone and moved on my screen. What evidence have you got that you've done this before? Show me some evidence of things that you've done in the past. How do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? And start to just build them up, and eventually they will get to that point. It'll take time, but you know, and if it runs much deeper than that, then, you know, seriously think about bringing in a coach to help you with your business.
Yeah.
I was just going through my mind that actually having somebody, a sounding board that you can talk to and be open and honest with, is so important.
Yeah.
Can I just add to that, Emma, because it's brilliant what you've done. And that thing, words can mean so much. People used to say about having a big bonus, you know, how am I going to get my bonus? I've got this, that and the other. But back to what was being said by Ali, I used to have, when I was in corporate, I used to have my team every Monday telling us what they'd done the week before, and, you know, celebrating that and doing, as you say, Ali, brilliant job, everyone recognising it. But the best one I ever had was the one thing that you'll see me get really angry about, and the whole team was like, I said, is if you've got a good idea and you don't share it.
Yeah.
Because you get people kind of going, I don't know if I should say this.
Yeah.
But you say, if we have a problem that comes up and you haven't shared that idea and it's made the problem worse, that's the only time I'll be pissed off.
Yeah. And way back, I found this exactly true, Pete, what you were saying. And I found this, that in a really competitive environment, it can be quite damaging, because people think knowledge is power. It's only power if you share it. It's not power if it's in your head. It's only power if you get it out there and share it with other people. Yeah. And I've left a lot of competitive industries because I really don't like that. I prefer to be in a more nurturing environment, and, you know, not where I go home from work feeling like I've been fundamentally judged today or berated for not doing something right. I worked for a boss who, you know, was constantly saying to me, why can't you get this right? And I threw it back at her and I said, why can't you train me properly? Yeah. And then I left.
Uni's not a necessity. I had exactly the same thing. I got all my grades, and my parents are going, off to uni then. And I was like, no, I want to go into fashion. They didn't teach you about that at school.
In all honesty, having done a degree, when I started tossing up how much I've spent on higher education, I think I've spent about £50,000 in my life on higher education. And if I could go back to 18-year-old me right now and give him one piece of advice, it would be, don't go to university, plan to spend £50,000 on a couple of coaches and a couple of training courses that you can get online through places like Open University, where you can manage your own pace of study. And instead of spending 3 years doing 2 or 3 lectures a week and then bumming around for the rest of the week whilst everyone else is working 80 hours, get working 80 hours right then and learn in 6 months what other people are doing in 3 years and get a head start. University is not the be all and end all these days. And I think what you're talking about bringing people on as well, I always try, I think like Ali was saying and Pete was saying, but be praise-led, be positive and affirmative when you're working with people. And I do this especially when I'm coaching. Don't ever phrase something as a negative. Even people who talk about a praise sandwich, so start with a compliment, then raise a problem, then finish with a compliment. The problem in the middle, phrase it in a positive way. You have done this well. Now you have an opportunity to do this, and you've also done that really well. So it's speaking in that positive and affirmative way that does lift people up and constantly reinforce their self-confidence and their self-belief. And actually, you know, I see it from coaching, it's good for people, but managers who do this in companies have got much more productive, much better engaged, much happier staff. And so that's really the key, I think, is to, as Ali was saying, always praise the stuff that's being done well. But even if something isn't going well, deliver the needs to develop those skills in a positive way.
Yeah, I've definitely
Right,
learned.
I'm going to have to call this to an end because I'm really conscious of time and people are dropping off, etc. I feel that we could talk about this forever, and go into a lot more detail. So I think that was wonderful. I hope everybody got some great takeaways. I know I did, and I think a lot of this is about believing in yourself and being the best person that you can be. So compare yourself to yourself, not to others. And so I thought that was excellent. Hope you guys did too. Ali, thank you very much for that. That was illuminating. So big round of applause.
Thanks, Ali.
Thank you. Thank you.
So
well received that compliment.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Take care out there. Hope you all put this into good practice, and look forward to seeing you all soon.
All the best, everyone.
Cheers.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris, for organising.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.